Today we're taking what we've been learning with sample spaces and using those tree diagrams and the fundamental counting principle. We're going to use those things to find probabilities and make predictions using those probabilities. So you'll see kind of after we do some examples here what that's going to look like. And it's going to go back to using some ratios and proportions and some of those things. So this is kind of a culmination of a lot of things we've been talking about recently and how we can put all of those things together. So go ahead and copy down these few examples first. The first one is a survey, which is just a method of collecting information. Some of you have probably taken surveys or given surveys even. Your parents have taken a survey. It's just a way to gather some information from a lot of different people. And the group being studied is the population. So for instance, if I wanted to know how many people at Portersville Christian School lived in Cranberry, I would simply give a survey, and the population is Portersville Christian School students or families. A sample is a smaller part of the population. So for instance, if I wanted to predict how many people in the whole school lived in Cranberry, but I didn't want to survey everyone, I could survey just the 6th grade class and say how many of you live in Cranberry. And then I would use that information to predict how many total students and families lived in Cranberry instead of actually finding it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use samples and those sample sizes that we've been finding, and we're going to predict what the population is actually doing. So for the first one, it says the students in Mr. Blackwell's class brought photos from their summer break. The table shows how many students brought each type of photo. So if you look at the table, we have 4 students brought campground photos, 6 brought photos from the beach, 7 brought photos from their home, and 11 were at theme parks. What was the probability that a student brought a photo taken at a theme park? To find the probability, remember, that's just how many things occur over the total. So we have probability of a theme park photo would equal how many total photos do we have? We have to add these all up. So if I do 4 plus 6, I get 10, plus 7, we get 17, plus 11, we're totaling 28 photos. So the total amount of photos we have to choose from is 28. Well, how many of those came from theme parks? 11 of them. So the probability of getting a photo from a theme park is 11 out of 28. So that's our probability. So remember, you just take the piece out of the total. So you'd add all those up to get the total. Now the second piece of this asks us, there are 560 students at the school where Mr. Blackwell teaches. Predict how many students would bring in a photo taken at a theme park. So we're taking what we just discovered. The probability of a theme park photo is 11 out of 28. We're going to use that information to predict how many out of 560. I want to know how many out of 560. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the proportion that we have. We're going to use that 11 out of, or excuse me, not the proportion, the ratio. We're going to use that probability. And we're going to use that to figure out how many out of 560. So this is really close to being what? A proportion. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to rewrite this and say 11 out of 28 equals something out of 560. Now, we need to find out 28 times what gives me 560. You may not know right off the bat. So what do? You take 560 and divide it by 28, and you should get 20. So we need to multiply 28 times 20 to get to 560. Well, if I do that by 20, I've got to multiply the top by 20. So 20 times 11 is going to give us 220 students. So approximately 220 students out of 560 would bring in a photo at a theme park. So now, do I know that? It might be much higher, it might be much less. We don't know. This is a prediction. we're guessing, based on the fact that 11 out of 28 students brought it in, we're guessing that 220 out of 560 would also bring in a theme park photo. So again, this isn't how many actually brought it in, it's how many we're predicting brought it in. And it's all using proportions and that the initial probability, and we set it equal to proportion. So make sure you have the total, because remember they had a total of 560 students, so I kept it on the bottom and I had to find the top piece. Make sure you don't get those mixed up. Let's go into another example. This one says a survey at a school found that 6 out of every 10 students have an internet weblog. So they first ask us, what's the probability that a student at the school has a weblog? Well, the probability that a student has a weblog is going to be the total number of students that we asked were 10, and how many of them had it? 6 of them. 6 out of 10 students had it. I simplify this. This is going to become 3/5. You could also write that as 60%, which could also be written as 0.6. All of those are the same. 3/5, 60%, 0.6. They're all the same probability. If there are about 250 students at the school, how many have a weblog? We're going to guess. Again, we don't know for sure how many because we didn't survey everyone. We know 3 out of 5. And so now I want to figure out five times what gives me 250, because I want to know how many out of 250. So 5 times 250, we're going to divide those, and it's going to end up giving me 50. So 5 times 50 gives me 250, so then I have to do 3 times 50, and I get x is going to be equal to 150 students. So we're predicting that 150 students have a weblog at the high school, or at the school. Again, we're not positive 150, it could be 120 or 167 or something like that, we don't know. We're just using the proportion that we had, we're using that probability, and we're going to solve the proportion to estimate how many we think. So your homework, 3 through 15 all, we are doing that in class at our next meeting. So make sure to bring your notes. Turn the notes in, please. Some of you are still not turning in notes, and then I have to chase you down. Make sure that you're turning your notes in at the beginning of the day. And then we'll go over any other additional examples or questions you guys may have on that assignment.